everybody. Welcome back.
Welcome back to another episode of Banterly. My name is Aditi.
And my name is Aiden.
So what's new in the life of Aiden?
What's new in the life of Aiden? Everything's pretty consistent, but I will say, I saw this movie last week that kind of changed everything for me. Not in like a huge way, but like I've talked about before, I don't love to go to the movies and to I'm not a big movie person. Fine, whatever, that's on the record. But I saw this movie with two of my friends called Problemista.
This is the story of Alejandro. He immigrated to the most competitive place on earth to become a world-famous toy designer.
I'm actually from El Salvador.
Pupusas.
Yes.
And those nuns they killed in the 80s.
Have you heard of that movie?
I don't know why I feel like I've maybe heard of it, but explain it to me. I don't think I know what it is.
So it was just going to be my friend and her friend going to see this movie, and then my plans got changed, so they invited me to join them. Wasn't planning on seeing this movie until literally 30 minutes before the movie started, but I had seen ads for it on Hulu because Tilda Swinton's in it, and she has this kooky hairdo, and I was like, oh, she looks crazy, but that's all that I knew about it. So we see this movie at the Angelica, and it is laugh out loud funny. Basically, this guy moves from El Salvador to New York City, and he's an aspiring toy designer, and he gets fired from his weird job working at a company that freezes the bodies of artists to keep them frozen in time until one day they can be unfrozen. But then he gets fired, and he needs to find a job in a month or else he will get deported. And so he ends up working for this kooky woman that Tilda Swinton plays, who's the ex-wife of one of the artists who was frozen, and she's trying to sell his eggs, his painted eggs. He paints. I know.
I was like,
the way I phrased that wasn't great, but he painted eggs and nobody liked the eggs, and she's trying to make a gallery for him with these eggs, and this poor guy just wants a job so he can stay in the country, and he wants to work for Hasbro making toys, and she's crazy and hilarious and a Karen, but she's it was so weird, and there were all these monster scenes and weird colors, and it was fascinating to watch and really funny. So if you should go watch it.
Yeah, I want to watch this. I looked it up. It's A24, and I feel like there hasn't been an A24 movie that I haven't liked. So I'm excited that they're doing a surrealist comedy. That sounds so fun.
Yeah, it's very good. 10 out of 10 would recommend. How about you? Anything new and popping in your life?
My pop culture news, which I think is the world's pop culture news, is Beyonce's new album, Cowboy Carter.
Yes. So good.
Incredible. 10 out of 10. Instant classic.
This ain't Texas. Ain't no hold 'em. So lay our cards down, 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 down.
That woman can do anything. How this woman has been sitting on this, because you've read all the things that was she was supposed to come out with Cowboy Carter first, but then the world needed Renaissance, the world needed to dance. So true. And it's just you hear how she manipulates her voice. She does opera in Italian randomly in the middle of it. What can't this woman do? And I'm hoping people will shut up about comparing her to Taylor Swift. We've already talked about this before. But I mean, come on. You listen to this and you're you are the greatest artist of all time. Not to be dramatic. I just think that's the truth. But I thought it was a fantastic album. What did you think? You like country music. I don't like country music usually. So I loved this. What were your thoughts?
I loved it too. I listened to it all the way through last Friday when it came out while I was working. And actually, what had happened was I listened to it all the way through Friday, but the night before when it came out on midnight, I saw someone posted Miley Cyrus, and I was like, what? I did not know that Miley Cyrus is going to be on the album. So her being, my number one Spotify Wrapped, I was like, what? Miley Cyrus? So I listened to that song and I loved it. Their voices blend so nicely together.
So well, yeah.
And it was such a true duet. It wasn't Beyonce featuring Miley Cyrus for one verse. They were constantly layering and each taking turns. It was just so good.
Say goodbye to the old me.
Came out of nowhere, didn't give no warning.
Pedal so heavy like a two most wanted. And I don't know what you're doing tonight, but I'll be your shot.
Shall we get into our question of the day? Do you believe in past lives? Do you?
Do I believe in past lives? Yes, I do. I haven't personally faced anything where I'm like, I've gotten a vision or felt like an attachment to something where I feel like I've been here in a past life yet. But I do believe those stories that I hear of those little children who are like, mommy, like, I died and I died in a fire, or, oh, I fell off this cliff, or I died in war. And then they can give all those specific details that are corroborated by people. And I know that some of it's BS and some of the people are just making stuff up. But I do believe that some of them are true, because some of the stories I've heard are just it's too real. And I feel like, yes, there are reincarnations of people in different ways. And yeah, so I do. Do you?
I felt like this was an interesting question because I feel like I also think of alternate universes that occur simultaneously. And I feel like those two concepts are relatively related in some way. I feel like for some reason I a little bit believe in alternate universes more. That might be wrong, but I'm thinking about like Everything Everywhere All at Once. And I just felt like all of the realms of possibility that exist every time you make a singular decision, I'm like, there has to be a version of me somewhere that made a complete opposite choice. Of something in my eye. Oh my God. Like there's a version of me that didn't get something in my eye and I was able to finish my sentence. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I agree with that. I think there's a billion different Aidens out there that are doing things that this Aiden isn't doing. So I'm with you there.
Yeah, I agree. Well, all this talk about past lives, and also Greta Lee, because Greta Lee is in Problemista, I found out from the internet.
Yes, she is.
Today, we're going to be talking about the movie Past Lives.
What a good story this is. Childhood sweethearts who reconnect 20 years later and realize they were meant for each other. In the story, I would be the evil white American husband standing in the way of destiny.
Shut up. There's just this kid in my head for such a long time.
So at this point, I've seen it twice, all within the past week. So again, late bloomer, but I've been under the weather this week, so I've had a lot of time to watch this movie twice. The first time, I will be honest, I did not love it. That's the first time. I didn't feel like I was there. I didn't feel connected to either of the two characters, so I didn't feel that emotionally attached to them. So I didn't cry at the end, which is new for me because I'm a crier. I might have teared up a little bit when Arthur was waiting on the steps and then Nora started to cry and they hugged. Mm-hmm. I might have like welled up a little bit, but there wasn't anything more than that. It wasn't like me finishing one day. But then the second time I watched it, I don't know what it was. Maybe I knew more about the story and what to expect, but I noticed things more. And honestly, I was confused. I was like, these people barely know each other. Like, why is everybody making such a big hullabaloo? Like, why are we crying over this?
Funny.
They didn't know each other. She moved away. She was 10, 12 years old. We all have childhood people that we hung out with a lot and then never see them again. But then as I watched it a second time, obviously you notice other things in different layers, and I liked it a lot more.
Did you cry more the second time? Or no?
I did not externally shed any tears, but internally I felt it a lot more.
Yeah.
I felt more emotionally connected to what was going on between all the characters than when I watched it the first time. But no, I did not I didn't cry. I'm such a crier. I'm disappointed in myself.
Yeah, that's wild. I so I avoided watching this movie for a long time because a lot of my friends I want to say this came out like May or June because I remember a lot of people talking to me about this back then. And I would see my friends' reviews on Letterboxd and they would be like, this movie completely destroyed me. And I was like, now why would I pick that for myself? And I was sad over the summer generally. Post-graduation, just a bunch of other things. I was like, I don't think I'm in a mental state to watch this movie. And so I didn't watch it until I had to for this. And I think if I had seen this movie over the summer, I would have been a wreck. I'm generally someone who does not deal well with like transitions and like saying goodbye to stages and chapters of life. And I think there was just something about their relationship where like he clearly represented a period of her life where she was very young, but like a period of her life where she lived back home in Seoul. And when they reconnect on Skype, you just see that they know so much about each other still.
와.
와.
와. 너다.
I mean, I feel like I, personality-wise, haven't changed too much from when I was a kid. Like, obviously, I've grown and I'm more mature, but I've always been competitive, ambitious, and it's like, I think it's crazy to, and I feel this way with my friends whenever I see them from high school now. I'm like, wow, I saw us when we were growing up in a way, and now we have landed in the spot that we always like kind of dreamed to achieve. I attach a lot of meaning to time and transitions and change, and I feel like this was a movie entirely about all of that, and seeing the visual representation of it, like, my chest was heavy, I feel, the entire time. Just like, I felt like so much was said and all the silences. Overall, I think it was a very well-constructed movie about humanity and relationships. I felt very connected to everything while watching it.
Little synopsis, Nora and Hae-sung were friends in elementary school. And then when they were about 12 years old, they spent a lot of time together. They went on one quote unquote date while their mothers watched them in the cute elementary school way that people do that. But then Nora's family immigrates to Toronto and Nora begins her life outside of Korea and Hae-sung stays in Korea. 12 years later, they reconnect over Facebook because Hae-sung reaches out to Nora. And Nora's at this point living in New York, trying to be a writer. Hae-sung is in the military serving. And then they fall out of touch again because Nora says, hey, I need to focus on my new life and not get too attached or wrapped up in my old life. 12 years after that, they reconnect. Hae-sung comes to New York, meets Nora's now husband, Arthur, and they spend a day together. And it was the first time that they'd seen each other since they were 12 years old. And yeah, you can imagine the emotions that come out of that.
혜성!
와, 너다.
와.
와.
진짜 와다. 와.
와.
How do you think it portrayed immigrant life, or did it teach you anything about what it's like to be an immigrant, or touching on your own experience?
Yeah, I think, I mean, a big part of Nora's character is the fact that she immigrated to Canada and eventually lives in New York to kind of pursue her writing dream and, you know, try to get a Pulitzer Prize. She talked about her identity in a way that I really relate to. In a lot of her conversations with Hae-sung, like talking about how he's actually Korean, like he's Korean, she's Korean American. And I mean, I feel very detached from my identity. I was the first in my family to be born in America. So I guess I'm not like Nora in that I had like a kind of grounding in India. I feel distanced from my Indian heritage in a way because, or especially compared to some of my peers, I didn't have that much exposure to my culture growing up. I don't know, I feel like I grew up in a very different way in comparison to others. And so whenever I do interact with other people who are quote unquote more Indian than me, I kind of feel like inadequate. I feel like she pushed away a lot of pieces of her identity. Like she knows a lot of Korean also, which I don't relate to. I don't know that much Hindi. So I'm losing there as well. But there was one point where she, I think, criticizes her own Korean while she's on Skype with Haesung, I think. And she's like, I don't know, she's always comparing her ability to be Korean to his ability, which I think is very interesting. And I think happens a lot if you are in a completely different country. And there's, I don't know, kind of an expectation from people of your same ethnicity to like, oh, you know, like all of these traditions, you know, all of these references, all of these languages, whatever. I don't know. I thought it was really nice to see that kind of immigrant experience portrayed in a movie that, as I mentioned, has gotten such huge critical acclaim. It was an interesting portrayal of, one, the American dream, like, oh, I'm going to go to the West, basically, in order to achieve these big dreams. And then also when you get there, feeling that disconnect from your identity. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think about that scene that you touched on after Nora and Haesung spent the day together and Nora was telling Arthur about it when she got home.
It's so crazy to see him be this grown-up man with a normal job and a normal life. He's so Korean.
When you're the only Korean person in the room, you feel super Korean. And then all of a sudden, this man from Korea who has only lived in Korea comes and you're like, oh my God, wait, am I really that Korean?
He still lives with his parents, which is really Korean. And he has all these really Korean views about everything. And I feel so not Korean when I'm with him, but also in some way more Korean.
It's like, boom, wait, what am I? If I'm not quite American, and I'm not, fully Korean, you're in this middle zone of trying to figure out where you stand.
I mean, I have Korean friends, but he's not like Korean American. He's Korean.
I really like what you said about not being Korean enough with other Koreans, but feeling super Korean when you're with Americans, basically.
Yeah.
Because I feel that way all the time. It's like you are an expert and the representative of your culture when you are with Americans. But then when you are, or at least how I feel when I'm with other Indian people, I'm like, I am the least knowledgeable person in this room. Like I have no grounds to say anything, to speak on anything. Like it's I feel like it's a space that I have been struggling to navigate my entire life. And I don't think it's ever really going to get easier. But it's just like, I really like the way you worded it. It's like you kind of constantly have this feeling of not fitting in, regardless of what space you're in. Unless you're with a bunch of other people that have the same relationship to their identity as you do. Like if I were in a room with Nora, I feel like we'd be like this. You know what I mean? But like it requires a very specific level of understanding. Like my awareness of Indian culture and traditions and stuff feels very surface level. Basically, when I got to college, I was like, I'm gonna be more involved in Indian clubs. I'm going to join like the Hindu Students Association. Like I'm going to do all these things. I really want to get in touch with my culture. I go to one event. One of the clubs had like a Halloween party at like the local bar. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go. I'm going to make new friends. I was a freshman in college. It was October. I was like, we're going to do this. We're going to commit. They're playing Bollywood songs. I just remember one conversation with this one kid and he was just like, oh my God, I can't believe you don't know these songs. And that is an experience that has been embedded in my head ever since it happened. And like, I didn't go to any more meetings after that. I didn't go to any single Indian student club event because I felt like I was being ridiculed for not holding the same level of knowledge and awareness as other people did, and I wasn't Indian enough to be in that space. So I never put myself back in that situation.
There are reasons cannabis is illegal in New Jersey for those under 21. If you're a parent, you should know them. Early cannabis use can inhibit brain development, impair learning, and increase the risk of later substance abuse and mental health issues. Talk to your kids about cannabis. Set clear boundaries. Most of all, be a role model. Be cannabis smart to stay cannabis safe. Learn more at cannabissafe.nj.gov.
We've talked about him a little bit, but I just want to go on a little bit of an Arthur rant because I really loved Arthur as a character. He was totally not what you would expect. I feel like if this would happen to me, ignoring the themes of coming from a different country and those barriers, but if, let's say that you're married to someone for 7 years, I think that's how long they were married, and then your spouse's childhood soulmate love crush interest comes back and they spend the whole day together and they're only talking together and they have a way of words. In this case it's Korean, and another case it could be they just have a way of communicating that you just don't understand. I'd feel so self-conscious and so jealous. I would be a mess. Arthur held himself together, and yes, it was a very complicated issue and it must have been really hard, but he seemed very understanding. And when he told Hae-sung at the end that he was really glad he came here and it was the right thing to do, like that, it's a very mature thing to say, because a lot of people would have ignored him or been like rude or just surface level nice. And I feel like he tried his best to extend an olive branch when the situation, which he kept joking about, was kind of crazy. And in general, he seemed like a nice guy who cared about his wife's culture.
You know, you only speak in Korean when you talk in your sleep.
I do?
Yeah. You never sleep talking English. You only dream in Korean.
How did you like Arthur and their relationship?
I read a critique about Arthur, which I initially, I don't know where I stand. I agree with you. Coming out of the movie, I was like, wow, he's so understanding and kind. And like, this is like a childhood friend. And I feel like I've seen so many movies where the entire plot is like, oh, this person from someone's past comes back and the current partner is like, oh, I can't compete with that. Like, I'm just going to bow out. You know what I mean? I feel like that's typically how this is framed. It was someone basically saying that if Nora were white, let's say she was European or something, and she had an ex-boyfriend coming from like Italy or Germany, he would maybe be more pissed. The author of this post felt that Arthur saw this as, or saw East Asian culture or Korean culture as to be very othered and very exoticized, that like, oh, I'm just going to let them go do what they're doing and I'm going to step back as a white person. Like they have things that they need to sift through, and you know, it's just, it has to do with their culture or whatever. That's like the vibe that they were getting from Arthur, and that like if it were a white woman, he wouldn't have acted that way. And I felt like that was an interesting immediate takeaway to have.
And it's not like Arthur was all, you know, positivity and just nice and just happy-go-lucky, just go with the flow. Like, we did see him struggle a lot with this, where he was having this little moment like, am I good enough for you? Like, I feel like you're going to, like, he had his moments that he shared how he was really feeling. It wasn't all, this is great, I love you, have fun.
Yeah.
He struggled, and especially when Hae-sung walked into his apartment, he was like holding his phone, he puts it down, you can see him like breathing and out, preparing for this.
Are you mad?
No.
Feels like you were.
I don't have a right to be mad.
What do you mean? Of course you do.
No, the guy flew 13 hours to be here. I'm not going to tell you that you can't see him or something. He's your childhood sweetheart.
I can't imagine it was like for anybody involved. For Haesung, that must have been a lot to meet the person that he probably is in love with, husband, at her apartment in a city that he's never been to. Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot. Now, do you have like friends from St. Louis that you keep up with? Like, what are your long distance, long-term connections, friendships, and how do you maintain them?
One of my friends, the one who lives farthest away, he lives in Australia now. So that's,
wow.
Yeah. And we keep in touch quite frequently via FaceTime, but the time difference is difficult. But he's an exception because Australia is, I don't know when I'll see him again, or I'll know I'll see him soon because he's coming back to America soon. But for a while, it was like, oh, you're in a different continent, country. Let me keep up with you and make an effort. For a lot of my friends that live in St. Louis or from college, I have realized even in college, I wasn't a great communicator. Like I wouldn't text them all the time. I don't in general like to FaceTime people. But when we're back home, it's like, boom, nothing changed. Like I'll reach out obviously every once in a while. If I see a TikTok that I think reminds me of them, I'll send it to them. But it's not like I'm sending weekly or even monthly updates about my life. But I still do feel connected with them. Yeah, but I mean, thankfully, a lot, I don't want to say all of them because I still have friends in Boston and St. Louis and Australia, but most of them are in New York. So I haven't really had to deal with a whole lot of long distance friendships. They're very close by. Yeah, but in general, bad communicator. I was not Skyping like Haesung and Nora were. It seemed like they were doing that every single day, which was cute, but I'm not about that life. How about you?
That's real. I don't like phone calls. I would prefer a FaceTime. And I do think I like FaceTiming, but I need it to be scheduled. If I'm randomly getting a call from you, I am not answering that phone. But I have a lot of, I was going to say I have a lot of friends back home in Tampa. I don't have a lot of, I've stayed in touch with 4 or 5 really close friends from Tampa. I think when I graduated high school, another transition, in my head, I was like, I'm going to keep all my friends for the rest of my life. And then obviously, as time passes, you kind of lose touch with people. It takes a lot of energy to keep up true connections. And I do feel with a lot of my friends back home, if I were to see them tomorrow, it would be super easy to catch up and get our vibe and dynamic back. But I really only keep up with a handful of people. My best friend from Tampa, he lives in Boston, so I get to see him relatively often, Northeast. But I think, social media in general has made it very easy to keep up with people. And Nora and Haesung, they found each other through Facebook. And I think, we've talked about social media a lot. We've talked about the internet and how things can go wrong so easily, with you and all that stuff. But the internet also really allows for connections to continue. Think back in the day, people were writing letters and putting them in a bottle in the ocean. They're like, maybe that'll find its recipient. Owls. Did people use owls? I don't know. Maybe that was only in Harry Potter. But it's so easy to connect with people. And I do try to be intentional with reaching out more.
I know. I'm trying to. There are some people that I haven't talked to in that amount of time that sometimes I'll respond to their story or something like that. Just an easy little, oh my God, this is funny. Or, oh my God, or a little story, just to say that, oh, I see you. I'm thinking about you, but I don't need to have a full blown FaceTime with you
right.
But yeah, it's very helpful to keep in touch with people. Instagram. This movie's called Past Lives. Why do you think it's not called Past Loves? And do you even think this movie is a romance movie? Is it a friendship movie? Is it a mix? Is it a identity crisis movie? Is it there's different types of relationships in life movie, and it's hard to put a word for them because they're complicated? Or D, all of the above? Or E, none of the above?
I think my choice is D. I think it's all of the above. It's a friendship movie and it's a romance movie. Despite having a fantastic connection with someone, it doesn't mean that you are meant to stay connected forever, whether it's through a friendship or through a relationship. These two people, they clearly have such a deep history and connection, and they just don't end up together. And obviously, as a viewer, like for me, I hate watching that because I'm like, you guys, like, this is perfect and you want it to work out, but sometimes it just doesn't. It is 100% past lives, not necessarily past loves.
I think past lives over past loves too. Obviously, they're not a romantic couple in this life, but in a past life, they might not even been a romantic couple. They could have been childhood best friends.
왕비랑 왕의 부하 뭐 그런 거.
아니면
They could have been best coworkers. You know, like there's so many other ways that they could have been connected that is keeping them connected in this life. And I think about that with my own life. What is it about this person that keeps drawing them to me in terms of friends and family? Well, family, I guess, blood, but like people in my life in a non-romantic way, like they're there and we have a connection. And where did that connection come from?
Yeah, I completely agree.
나뭇가지의 관계였을 수도 있는 거지.
Why don't you all let us know what you think? Past lives or past loves? Do you believe in past lives? What did you think about Arthur? Do you agree with the critique?
Share your thoughts with us at banterly@immigrantlypod.com and engage with us on our socials at Immigrantly Media on Instagram and at Immigrantly Podcast on TikTok.
Banterly is produced by Shay Yu, written by us, the co-hosts Aditi Misra and Aidan Taylor. The executive producer and editorial review is done by Sadia Khan.
Our sound designer and editor is Ben Allman. The Banterly theme music is by Simon Hutchinson, and additional music is by Epidemic Sound.
See y'all next week.
See y'all next week.